Welcome to the bold analysis. The post-protest situation of this country, Kenya, cannot be sugar-coated anymore. And while the oligarchs around the president are outrightly going to social media to heap praises on the conduct after that protest, or rather the state of the nation after that protest, that cannot be that cannot be the truth. If you look at what the international media is saying about Kenya. I want to read for you a tweet from Farah Maalim, what Farah Maalim posted and what Farah Maalim is telling the president. And they try to debunk that using what the international media, or rather what the global community is saying about Kenya. Kindly make sure you watch the end, because in this one we are going to be analytical on the state of the country. But first, I want to give you an update about our mission in Kilifi. I am still in Kilifi. We are supporting some 15 elderly women, and one old man is involved, is also there, in Magarini. So today on Monday, I spent better part of my day there. I said there are houses we were building. There are 5 that we are supposed to repair 2. They don't have doors, so we are supposed to put doors na tutengeneze kidogo. And then there are some that we need to do the real work. So I was in Kilifi. We already started with 2 houses today on Monday. I've only managed to, of course, supervise 1. So between Monday, today, and Tuesday, tomorrow, we will be doing the work on those houses, rebuilding those houses, because naambiwa kwamba situation si mzuri, kwamba kukinyesha, kukifuruka kidogo, maji inaingia ndani. Wale ni wazee, alafu pia wapo katika hatari ya kudhulumiwa, kwa sababu huenda kwamba katika sehemu ambazo watu wanaweza wakaingia. Sasa pia wako katika hatari hata ya kudhulumiwa. Ndio maana tukaona kwamba tuzitengeneze hizo nyumba. The other need that is there is about the mattresses. Those ones we are going to deliver when we give the food donation on Thursday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll be doing just a bit of the building. No, Tuesday and Monday rather, we're doing the building. Yes. We'll do the fundraiser, final fundraiser on Wednesday, so that we can buy food stuff and donate on Thursday. So we still have a long week, 4 days. Kindly, this is one of the missions that I can tell you, our communities must really work. If we really mean devolution to work, we must be very careful. Without being seen as maybe a profiling, Kilifi County is amongst the poorest. I think if you look at the photos, the kind of photos I've been looking around those areas, it's very dry. Things doesn't look good this end, by the way. Kwa sema tu kweli kwamba huku mambo si mzuri. Hata unajua wale ambao wanaishi huku wanajua kwamba ile ambayo inazungumzia ni kweli. Things are not really looking good in Kilifi. So kindly let's support this mission with what you can get. I was able by today I had around 42,000. I've used really part of it, but I believe tomorrow will still be on ground. So just push. If you get hata ukipata nitanunua mlango, nitanunua huku hakuna dirisha, by the way, that's what I've realized. Mlango tu na smiti, na pia kununua hizo makuti, kuna zile zinatengenezwa na makuti, and pole too. I'm hopeful that we will achieve. I can't tell you, this is one of the most challenging mission, but I believe God, we will achieve this. So let's support, and really we believe that by Thursday we shall have achieved our target. We're targeting 150. We're still way far because we're also using it, but pole najua kwamba itawezekana. Now, this is what Farah Maalim is telling the president. And without much ado, I just want us to look at that tweet here. President William Ruto has performed better than any other president before him in the first 2 years of office. The Kenyan shilling gained massively against all other convertible currencies and continues to get stronger in the midst of those protests. He has borrowed from World Bank and IMF to retire debilitating Chinese loans and Eurobond borrowed by his predecessor. And that's why I normally have an issue. When people say predecessor, I even wonder, William Ruto was part of that government that borrowed the Eurobond. And if there are people that partied with Eurobond, then William Ruto was one of the attendees in that party. Then he's saying both Nigerian and Bangladesh currencies lost big after protests. Ruto reduced government spendings, surely, reduced government spendings to tame wastage, beginning with his first lady's offices. Record numbers of Kenyans have found employment outside the country. The coffee and tea sectors are picking up tremendously. The sugar sector is equally cruising towards self-sufficiency. Let's give Ruto space to perform. One wonders why, under Uhuru, Kenyans didn't raise the issues they are raising now and the protest. To be fair, the economy is today doing better than it did 3 years back. So Farah Maalim is wondering, there are two things. Why are Kenyans asking William Ruto so many questions than what they asked Uhuru Kenyatta? That is number one. Number two, post-protest, we are doing better. Let's look at, just to tell you this, I'm holding Standard. I'm looking for there's an article in Standard here. I don't want to just to do hearsay. Sometimes it's very, I don't know that will be here. There's a story in Standard. I think I should, this is Nation. There's a story that Standard carried about debt, our debts. Yes. I think I should have it. Yes. This story here. Debt headache for Ruto amid credit downgrade meeting Gen Z demands. Contrary to what the local politicians would want to pamper William Ruto with, Kenya's credit rating has been downgraded just a month after that Gen Z protest was witnessed in the country. And before we look at this, if there is something that should really worry this country, is the fact that government has kept mum on matters of debt. I have seen Jimmy Wanjigi going public and explaining what exactly is this debt and asking these questions. What exactly are these debts we are paying? Where can they be published? Why aren't we being shown what we are paying? And in fact, no one has dared from government to maybe counter or discredit Wanjigi's side of the story. Hear that here.
Is that our laws anchor this debt. It says, for example, that debt must be on the budget. Number one. It says that debt in the medium to long term should only be taken for development. Number two. It says that you cannot borrow for recurrent expenditure. In other words, to pay salaries, or if people want to get on a jet plane to fly off to America, you can't pay for that. You can't pay for any other expenditure other than development. And then it says, number three, that if you want to borrow because you have cash flow problems, you can, but it must be within 1 year and it must be paid within that 1 year. And on top of that, it gives a maximum, a ceiling. And the ceiling says this, it cannot be 5% more, it can only be a maximum of 5% of the total tax revenue, audited tax revenue returns of the previous financial year. So if you collected 2 trillion in tax revenue, then 5% means that you cannot take more than 100 billion. It also goes further to say that is expected to be an overdraft at CBK. Now, that is the basis of our laws. One other provision I might like to say is what is called Article 214. Article 214 says there is the consolidated fund where all our revenue must be put in. So whether it's tax revenue, whether it is debt revenue, it must be put in one simple fund called the consolidated fund, one account, nothing else. So where did the rain start beating us? In 2013, the Uhuru Ruto government went to the parliament and they proposed an amendment number 1 to the Consolidated Fund, an amendment through the Public Finance Management Act, that you amend the Constitution, Article 214, through the Public Finance Management Act, which, as you and I know, is an illegality. You cannot amend the Constitution through an act. And they added 2 more provisions that were not in the Constitution, saying that money, in essence, do not have to enter the consolidated fund. That was the first. The second is that they introduced something called supplementary budget number 2. Supplementary budget number 2 was another foundation of fraud. If you read the provisions in the Constitution on a supplementary budget, first it is an addition to the budget that has been passed by the end of June that year. So it is just supplementing the items there, and there is a maximum that the addition cannot be more than 10%. Now, that means that there's a ministry, for example, that is building a road, and they find that it was 100 shillings, and the cost has gone up to 110, so they ask for the 10 more. But it is already in the budget, 100 shillings. Now here, in supplementary 2, they suddenly decided they're introducing something called a new budget with the new projects that were not in the previous budget passed in the appropriations of that June. So this is where the fraud began. Now, the fraud began with those 2. So money started being borrowed that were not on the budget. Money started going into accounts that were not the consolidated fund. And our summary is simply this. And I'll give you a summary from July 2013 all the way to June 2023. 10 years. Remember, I said debt is a top up, it is not a principle. So we said, let us look at the accounts of government. What is the government expenditure? How much did the government put on the budget for development? It was 6 trillion shillings. How much did they put for the counties? We put the figure. How much are their salaries over those 10 years? We put the figure. How much were their operations expenses? We put the figure. How much were their pensions? We put the figure. One item we removed, because this is what is called a primary balance, we removed one item called any debt payments. So we found a figure of 14.6 trillion. We said, very good. That's the sum total of 10 years. Fantastic. So how much income did we get? How much was KRA stating that they got? All right? So KRA, we did their actuals, not estimates. It's simple math. We calculated simple math, and that figure over that period was 13.3 trillion.
So Njiki has been talking about this and releasing dossiers, going to television stations, going to TV stations, and government has kept mum on this issue of debt. And in fact, that is what has caused the disquiet, because you want to convince the people that I am doing our best to pay the debt so that we are not auctioned as a country. But the country is asking you these debts you are crying that you are the one paying, where are they? Which debts are they? You cannot make them public. They've been kept amongst the state treasures, amongst the top secret that no one really wants to talk about. Now, just on that, Kenya has been downgraded by three global credit rating institutions. India, the global CRB. The latest downgrade is by S&P, which cited concerns over the government's fiscal consolidation efforts and mounting debt levels comes at a precarious time for the Ruto administration. So the first organization that lowered the credit rating of Kenya is S&P. Then that downgrade followed another one in July that was done by the Moody's. Moody's downgraded Kenya's credit rating further into junk status in July, and the third one was by Fitch. Fitch downgraded sovereign rating to B from B minus. From B minus to B. In academia, that would have been that would have been a promotion. That would have been a better rating. But in this, they're saying from B minus to B is actually a downgrade. And they're saying earlier, Fitch downgraded foreign rating to B minus from B. Yes. To B minus from B. It was B. So we were downgraded from B to B minus. Earlier this month, sending Kenya's dollar bonds lower. Analysts said that the confluence of these challenges, the credit rating downgrades, the unrest, and the broader economic headwinds has left Ruto in limbo. Now, on one end, we are talking about Kenya's ability to borrow is going down. And maybe let's just delve there a bit and do some brief explainer. We have two sources of revenue for government. We have the ordinary revenue, which is the taxes. Then we have the debt, the loans, as the other way that government funds itself. And then in loans, we have domestic loans and foreign loans. Now, if you are rating in the external market is poor, that means that you borrow at higher interest. There's a likelihood that you have higher interest. And of course, it becomes a bit difficult to borrow externally. That leaves government with a very narrow space of then banking on domestic borrowing. Now, domestic borrowing also have a problem. Domestic borrowing is normally abused at one point. Number two, when it is government borrowing more, banks are in business. Banks are more comfortable to borrow government than even to borrow individuals. So when we take that space, when government is borrowing more, it seems the private sector is affected because now the banks have to balance the books and give government more. And if the private sector cannot borrow more, then it means even the economy cannot do, because it's the private sector that borrow to put up companies, put up infrastructure, put up houses and this and that. So the more they invest, there is money circulation. So the effect here is that Ruto is really going to is in a very dangerous spot. And while the people around the presidency would want to insinuate that the Gen Z protest that had no effect in this country, we are just trying to lie to ourselves. But in real sense, we are in some sense of danger. Now, the rating downgrade has some far-reaching impacts on Ruto's 2027 prospects. And I've just categorized that. I've just put them in these categories. Number one, the hostile external funding market will create another pool of hot air promises. Now, when it becomes hostile for Kenya to borrow externally, and external borrowing is the space that we've been exploiting to fund our projects, it means we are likely again to have projects that we cannot fund, and that creates a big problem. Number 3 is now the second one, and due to the fact that we cannot meet our obligation of, especially on doing those promises that we're making. Remember, the promises are political promises that give the president social contact with the people. Now, when we have unmet promises, the social contact between the president and the population widens. And now that brings us to one thing. The president will then opt for taxation. I told you the only 2 means of getting money. Opt for taxation. Increasing taxation affects the sovereign. The people of Kenya are the ones that are hurt when you increase taxation. And now that will also create a hostile environment between Ruto and the hustlers. And lastly, huge challenges in debt diplomacy. Kenya, we've really been talking about our debts. The more we cannot, what we'd have been doing, and if you look at what Farah Maalim is saying, is we borrow Nyango to pay Paul. And if we will not be able to get good loans from Nyango to pay Paul, then our debt servicing is also in limbo. The challenges about this is that they should be made public. I listened to Joho saying that we have debts that we can pay. When we can exploit our minerals, we can pay the debts. I wish those are made public. Kenyans can scrutinize and say, okay, fine, let's tighten our belts so that we do it. But there is a problem here. While on the other end, you can push the members of the public to be patriotic so that the debts are serviced, the political class are partying and there is a lot of wastage. Contrary to what Farah Maalim is saying about the president would have stopped wastage, there's nothing like that. We've seen a bloated wage bill. The wage is still bloating, is still bulging, because how Moses Kure is being given and is being taken to that David Lee-led advisory council is something most of us cannot understand. It's just part of increasing, at ministerial level. Some of these advisors operate at a ministerial level. And they've declined even to return some of the cars and some of the budgets that have been given as ministers. So ladies and gentlemen, that is my take. Kindly let's support the Kilifi mission.